tonight on Focal Point.
The government deems that people at the age of 16 are mature enough to go out and get a job and contribute to society via taxation, and we believe that should come with the right to vote and to influence how and where that taxation is spent, so that priorities for young people are reflected in government policy.
Our interaction with victims of hate crime would say that for those people who report crimes, they generally have a positive experience with the police, which shows that the police have taken the lessons. They've been doing their training well, understanding the needs of LGBT people, understanding how to talk to LGBT people.
It is from these communities, it's their great-grandfathers, their grandfathers that went off to the war. And in this way, it's a kind of remembrance, an act of remembrance, but it's also making the people feel a sense of belonging to the history of World War I and World War II.
Today, members of the Northern Ireland Youth Forum, including members of Youth Parliament and members of Youth Congress, have had a meeting with Alistair MacDonald, the leader of the SDLP, and Claire Hanna, the newly selected SDLP MLA for South Belfast. We discussed a range of issues, the main one being Votes at 16 and our campaign, which has been ongoing for about 4 years now, to lower the voting age in Northern Ireland elections from 18 to 16. And we also discussed wider issues for young people in society and how politicians can engage with people of our demographic.
It's important to have the voting age lowered to 16 because it means that young people can be included in society and have their say in what will affect them in their future. We want to have a say in what we can do in our society and what will affect us and how we will grow up and how, again, our children will grow up then.
I was invited here today and I was delighted to be able to accept the invitation to meet these young people and hear the work that they're doing. I'm always nearly prepared to listen rather than to talk too much, and you know, it was enlightening to hear the passion and the commitment that they have to engaging politically, but also asserting themselves, and the Votes at 16 is a key part of that. And as somebody who commenced my own political career as an activist when I was 16, I'm in total sympathy with them, and the SDLP will, I've talked to colleagues, the SDLP is 100% behind them. We believe there should be votes at 16. As my son said to me, and has said a number of times, why is it that people are coaxed and encouraged to join the British Army and go and die in places like Iraq when they're 16, but yet they can't have any say in how their society is run? So I believe the time has come for people to get votes at 16.
Laws and rules and stuff do evolve and do change, and it wasn't too long before that people who didn't own property didn't have votes, that women didn't have votes just a century ago. So it's appropriate that evolves. I think Scotland has shown us a lot of things politically in the last year. They had such a vigorous engaging political conversation around the referendum. For me, I think the most valuable lesson was look at all they did and look at who they swept in, and they didn't spill a single drop of blood, and they weren't at each other's throats. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from Scottish politics, but putting that faith and trust in young people to say, you know, you have every right to shape the country and the region and the cities that you're in is very important, and it is about trial in that. So I believe there's cross-party support here, which is encouraging, and across the water, and hopefully, as you say, it is about trialling things and changing things, and maybe for this referendum, and then young people will, I believe, show that they're entitled to have that vote. I think it's important to establish patterns. All the evidence shows that people who do cast their first vote, you know, at 18 or 19 or 20, are inclined to keep the habit and continue to be diligent voters. I'm strongly in favour of engaging more people in the political process.
The voting age was amended. I would like to see parties really getting active and getting new members. I'd like to see them really properly investing in their youth wings, getting more political parties on the spectrum, because the current executive parties are, let's be honest, a bit bland and quite sectarian, apart from the Alliance, of course. You know, definitely parties need to be involved. It needs to be everyone getting together. Votes at 16, it can't be a token, and it'd be irresponsible not to actually tell people how how you should, or what's the best way, what would be best for you. We have to tell people. It'd be pointless. You give people the vote, they might not go out and vote, but you have to tell them the benefits of going out and voting, how your life will get better, you know, and it has to come in. You cannot have the probably most information-crazed generation that has created revolutions, the Arab Spring, young people out on the streets, through social media. That just shows young people have so much power. Let's give it to them. Let's actually say, well, you know what? You have shown that you are terribly politically aware. Social media is a force for good. You won't be influenced by pointless propaganda. You'll make a critical and proper decision when you go out and vote.
Every generation has the right to write its own script politically, and I believe that the more we can reach out to 16 and 17-year-olds, the more they will influence their future, and the more they will take responsibility for their own future politically.
It's not about one particular issue or campaign. A lot of young people have different things which matter to them, but really it's about making our politicians take into account young people when they make all their decisions, because all decisions they make will affect young people in health, in education, in universities, in taxation. All of those things do include young people, and we are a part of the society, and we believe we have the right to influence it and make a change.
The Policing Board have released updated policies in regards to the LGB and T communities. In the studio with me today to discuss these changes are Gavin Boyd from the Rainbow Project and Colin Flynn from Cara Friend. Colin, is the updated policy welcomed?
Yes, any policy which updates itself from time to time or is kept under review is always welcome. And particularly in a fast-moving society such as we have at the present time, where there's ever-increasing diversity, more and more people coming out, pressures on police resourcing, all of those things are so absolutely vital. There are also the trends in our society with more and more people from outside Northern Ireland coming to live here. Such as asylum seekers and refugees, and also our European citizens who are arriving here, and many of them accessing our services on an increasing basis. So we do have to reflect that, and the police should be reflecting these trends as well.
And Gavin, do you think it was important to supply two separate reports, one for LGB and one for transgender?
I think it was really important. I think it was a really smart thing for the board to do, because it's really important. While the LGBT community, as people of minority sexual orientations, minority genders, experience some commonality in terms of their isolation or their marginalisation in society, there can be quite different experiences between people who are trans and people who aren't trans. And so I think it's really important to have a dedicated part of the review that looks specifically at the experiences of trans individuals, because for a long period of time those experiences haven't really been seen, haven't been heard, and in order for the police to provide a good service to trans individuals, it's important that they recognise those particular needs of that group.
And Colin, do you think this updated policy will bring effective change?
Yes, certainly it will, but it has to be monitored effectively. There have to be mechanisms and tools used to monitor these policies, and it is very important that the Policing Board and the PSNI continue to work very closely with the LGBT community, the sector organisations that they can identify. One of the sad things was that the reference group which the Policing Board had seemed to just disappear. I think it was difficult to keep running for the various reasons I've explained. It's staffing, also some input from the sector as well. I think it was because we have so many different things we have to do, poorly funded, so many demands in our time, a lot of voluntary support as well, volunteers working within the sector. a lot of that happens. So it falls to a few to do a lot of things. And I think that I must just say that that is part of the reason why it has been so difficult to do a lot of this work. But the work has to be done for the sake of those people on the streets who are abused or in their homes or whatever. We must continue with the work. But it is very important that it's refreshed, that it's monitored on a continuous basis, and that we see reports on an annual basis as well.
And could you tell us about the significance of the Trans Manifesto in Parliament buildings?
Sure, I think symbolically having that kind of visible trans presence in the Assembly is a really important thing. I think we need to see a lot more trans visibility in society. I know the manifesto that was introduced at Parliament buildings was largely modelled on the manifesto that had been developed in other parts of the UK, and I think it's really good because it's short, it's simple, it has a few key actions that it wants government to do around increasing visibility for trans people, increasing opportunities, particularly around employment, and increasing the safety and security that trans people feel in their homes, in society, and in work. So I think it was an important step to see that launched in Parliament buildings, but government here has a lot of work to do in meeting the needs of trans people. The gender equality strategy, which is currently being redeveloped by OFM DFM, should be a framework for ensuring greater equality for trans people in Northern Ireland going forward. I know that the department has worked hard in making sure that it does adequately reference the needs, experiences and aspirations of trans people. So I think that's something that we should keep an eye on going forward to make sure that it's fully implemented, it's fully funded to build the capacity of the trans sector organisations to be able to meet the needs of their community.
And what policies have changed the most since the last report?
I mean, I would say it wouldn't be so much the policies that have changed, but the culture within the policing service in Northern Ireland and the policing board as well. The police, I think, recognising the traditional underreporting of homophobic and transphobic hate crimes, recognised that there was a body of work to do to increase confidence amongst LGBT people that they could report crimes to the police and that they would be dealt with appropriately. I think a lot of our interaction with victims of hate crime would say that for those people who contact the police, for those people who report crimes, they generally have a positive experience with the police, which shows that the police have taken the lessons. They've been doing their training well, understanding the needs of LGBT people, understanding how to talk to LGBT people, and that's increasing the confidence amongst the community. So I think culturally the police are moving in the right direction. It's not perfect. There are still gaps in service, but I think understanding the change that's happened is a really good thing.
And Colin, the detection rate for crime in 2010 and 2011 was at 27.3%, but for homophobic crime it was lower again at 17.5%. Why do you think it was lower?
I think probably part of the difficulty is that people are reluctant to get involved in the whole inquiry process. First of all, they're reluctant to report because then they would be exposed to the public glare. There's a lot about perception as well, huge amount about perception. And we're also always trying to battle with this, and the police are always trying to battle with the perception that, it is safe to report. It's always safe to report, because at any stage you can proceed, you can pull out of the process if you want to, provided you haven't wasted police time. But nevertheless, we would always encourage people to go the whole way if they possibly can. It may well be that by reporting a crime, whether that is more likely with homophobic rather than transphobic, that if you report that crime, then you're exposing your family as well and your friends, and you may not be out, and that's one of the big difficulties. So it's bound to be the case that those cases are not as successful.
And Gavin, the rate is even lower again for transphobic crime at 12.5%. In saying that though, in the past 8 years of 49 crimes that have been recorded, only 4 of them have had an outcome. Is this not extremely worrying?
It's frustrating, I would say, more than worrying, because we are trying to increase the number of crimes reported, because increasing reporting is really important because of the traditional lack of reporting for particularly homophobic and transphobic hate crimes. The nature of hate crime is that if it's the victim's perception that they have experienced a hate crime because of their sexual orientation or their gender, then the police have to record it as that and investigate accordingly. Hate crime is a difficult category of crime to investigate. Most people think that when we talk about hate crime, when we talk particularly about transphobic hate crime, that it's someone coming up to you in the street and you get a smack in the face. And yeah, that happens, but that's not the kind of the broad experience that we see coming through with the victims that we support. Most of the hate crime that people experience is about the kind of ongoing low-level intimidation and harassment in and around their home. And that kind of crime is very difficult to evidence. Particularly when it's about things being shouted through windows at night. It's very difficult to provide evidence to follow that case right the way through to prosecution. So I think that we all have work to do in helping the PSNI to develop the skills and tools to be able to see those crimes brought right through to prosecution, to conviction and sentencing as well.
And Colin, one of the recommendations made was that the PSNI would undertake a training strand for the LGBT communities. Do you think this should be a priority?
It is vital that officers are well trained to put themselves in the shoes of the person they are speaking to. If they are meeting someone from an LGBT background, it's vital that they understand the sensitivities around that. It's vital that they have empathy with that, with those individuals, so that they can understand how they feel. Feelings are very important, I think, in these, and to understand the feelings of other people in any form of investigation, but particularly where it relates to a hate incident or a hate crime, it's vital that those feelings are transmitted.
And finally, Gavin, do you think that there are more recommendations that could be worked on?
I mean, I think the report is good in that it doesn't throw too many recommendations at the police. I think the ones that are in the report are good. They're well evidenced. And the actions are doable. I think that there's more work for the police to do in how it engages with the community, particularly outside Belfast, in those more rural, more isolated parts of Northern Ireland. You can have quite a different experience than if you're living in one of the bigger cities. So I think making sure that the good work that the PSNI does in Belfast and in Foyle as well is replicated throughout the other districts. But I think generally the report is good. It highlights the good work that has been done over the past number of years, and also highlights the work that still needs to be done to get to the stage where LGBT people feel perfectly willing and able to report every crime or incident that they experience. But I think also the report highlights the need for greater conviction rates, greater detection rates for those kind of crimes. So I think the police will take a good look at the review, and certainly will be holding them account to any failures to meet the needs of our community.
Gavin and Colin, thank you both very much for coming into the studio and discussing this with us today.
Thank you very much.
I have always worked in theatre. Before I came to Queen's, I worked in the professional theatre for 35 years. And a lot of what I did was to do with creating theatre out of archival resources and historical material. When the Decade of Centenaries came along, I was asked to consider, initially by the Ulster Museum, writing a piece about the First World War. It took over my life for about 2 years, and the result was Medal in the Drawer. The idea in the title being that in the nationalist communities, a lot of the medals that were given to nationalist soldiers ended up at the back of a drawer if they weren't actually sent back to the War Office, because after partition people didn't want to admit that they had had anything to do with the British Army.
So I think that's a good thing for a play like that to be in a local community centre. And then we're launching this mural behind us. Actors have done a fantastic performance and just really literally and metaphorically set the scene for launching this mural, which is the same story.
The play is the story of my great uncle, who was one of the few Catholics who fought in the 36th Ulster Division. And when I was approached a couple of years ago to write a play about the First World War, I immediately thought of him because his death penny had hung in our hall in West Belfast for many, many, many years, and I could never find out any information. So that kind of started me on a research process which took me to his grave in Leeshanhoek Cemetery. It took me to the Museum of the Royal Irish Rifles. It took me all sorts of places to find out what happened to him. And I did find out some of what happened to him, but this is a play, not history, and what I couldn't find out is supplemented from the imagination. But it's a project very dear to my heart because it's my own personal family history that I feel that I didn't know anything about and that I've had the opportunity to reclaim.
How did this project develop then in terms of, bringing murals and drama pieces together?
Well, we delivered this project with Tigers Bay Historical Society, and Aoife from the group and me went to an exhibition in City Hall about World War I, and the performance was on there, and we just asked Brenda after if she would be interested in coming and performing in Tigers Bay, and she leapt at the chance, yeah. So we're delighted.
Well, art is very, very important. Through theatre and through education, people do get a better sense of what it was like. It's more dramatic, if you know what I mean. And the same with the mural, the artwork of the mural. It draws people in, and we had young children here the other day when we were getting the badges ready to put up, and it caused them to ask questions, which normally they wouldn't.
How important do you think it is to have these kind of pieces, remembering history in our communities?
Well, I think it's vitally important, especially when you take into account a lot of our younger generation will have no idea what actually took place. And if anything, if we can learn from the horrors, not to repeat them over again. So for those reasons, and many, many more, of course, because we owe the democracy that many of us enjoy today because of people who went out and died in our place for our freedom.
I think art's a very useful tool for regeneration. I think it helps to regenerate communities, and I think it makes it a lot easier to research those kind of social history stories if there's a clear product at the end, and in this case the product was a lovely art piece by the artist Johnny McCurr, designed by the local community.
The drama workshop or drama on stage provides a safe space where in a kind of it affects a kind of distancing whereby things that would normally perhaps in everyday life be a bit contentious can actually be addressed because for all intents and purposes it's not real at that moment. So what you find is when you remove it out of the reality and put it into a fictional, that people are much more comfortable about discussing things that are contentious. And that's the next stage of our project. We hope to be able to work with community groups in that way to address contested histories in the context of the decade of centenaries.
From the plains of royal Meath, strong men came marching through.
Well, I think that they should continue these projects, obviously, because it does involve the community. I know guys here who've been involved in this with Arts for All, who previously were doing nothing, and now whether it's photography, whether it's helping out with a mural, whether it's putting up scaffolding, or even doing surveys in the community, I think that's vitally important also, that people are actually coming out and getting involved. So that can only be a good thing to help community spirit.
It is from these communities, it's their great grandfathers, their grandfathers that went off to the war. And in this way, it's a kind of remembrance, an act of remembrance. But it's also making the people feel a sense of belonging to the history of World War I and World War II.
And now, tomorrow's weather.